Giving President Trump more power over the federal government, the Supreme Court leans yes in a clash that dates back to the New Deal. COVID-era fraud in Minnesota has been a running story for years, but it's under new scrutiny with heavy political fallout. We will talk to a Republican seeking to capitalize. Jasmine Crockett on the verge of entering the Texas Democratic Senate primary. She's already vanquished one Democrat, Colin Allred, who will explain to us why he dropped out. Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Welcome to the Takeout. America First versus Make America Great Again. For most of the Donald Trump era, they have been interchangeable. If you were a Trumpist, you were both MAGA and America First. We should note both those slogans lived a long and happy life long before Trump came along. President Woodrow Wilson was the first on the national stage to evoke America First. It was a clarion call way back then to keep America out of World War I. Wilson reversed himself on that, leading to an America First revival before World War II. Same goal, keep America out. And Make America Great Again, that was Ronald Reagan's slogan in 1980. Now, sure, Trump has given galvanizing political electricity to both of these shop-worn slogans, but they have never, ever been originally his. And until recently, they have lacked definition beyond the very powerful Trump persona. But now, some Republicans, imagining a political life whenever that might be without Trump, are seeking to define differences, none more visibly than former Trump stalwart, Georgia Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. Here is the Congresswoman with my colleague Leslie Stahl on 60 Minutes.
Are you MAGA?
I am America First.
And that's not the same as MAGA.
MAGA is President Trump's phrase. That's his political policies. I call myself America First.
Greene offered one list of issues where, from her POV, Trump has walked away from America First.
He passed a crypto bill that helped out all the crypto donors. He has served Israel's interest, even attacking Iran. He has served Big Pharma. He didn't take away the COVID vaccines that we want to see taken away.
That's Greene's take. It's not the same as other Republicans trying to define how America First differs from MAGA. Broadly, MAGA, according to America First detractors, is more comfortable with, maybe even cozy with, what Sarah Palin used to call crony capitalism. Also, they say it's indifferent to issues like the Epstein files, skeptical of the ongoing affordability crisis, and, generally speaking, more focused on international matters. The Trump White House would argue this is a distinction without a difference, that on trade especially, tariffs, tax cuts, military spending, reining in the federal bureaucracy, energy exploration, and even foreign policy, MAGA and America First, they would say, walk side by side. Greene is not alone, but she is one of only a handful of dissidents once aligned with Trump who now say he is no longer what he once was. For this, today, Trump called Greene a, quote, very dumb, low IQ traitor, unquote. Greene told Stahl that she dealt with death threats aplenty from the left when she backed Trump. Now, those death threats, she told Stahl, come from the right, and for her GOP colleagues are a cautionary tale.
Is there in that support fear? Does the support come about because they're afraid that they'll get death threats?
I think they're terrified to step out of line and get a nasty Truth Social post on them.
We start with Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes. This afternoon, Nancy, the president talked about a $12 billion aid package for farmers, and that sort of gets into this schism, because part of that is to alleviate things dealing on the trade stage, aid to Argentina and farmers there. So part and parcel of what the president talked about today wasn't that far from this other conversation.
Right, and we were wondering if you'd get asked as well, Major, about Marjorie Taylor Greene, because just this morning he lashed out at her online in response to that 60 Minutes interview. He likened her to a jilted lover. which gets at, I think, how close they were, not necessarily romantically, but politically, before this schism between Marjorie Taylor Greene and the president, both over policy and over the Epstein files. And she made a few notable accusations in the interview on 60 Minutes. First, she said that because of the president's comments about her, calling her repeatedly a traitor, that she had gotten death threats and that her family had too. Then she said that when she warned the president that she was getting these death threats, he responded in a, quote, extremely unkind, unquote, manner, though she didn't elaborate. And then finally, she raised the concerns that you just talked about, which is that there are other Republicans in Congress who have shared behind closed doors that they feel the same way she does, but that they are afraid to express those differences with the president publicly because they're worried that they will be his next target of a nasty Truth Social post.
And on this aid package to farmers, what did the president or the administration say is in it, and when is it going to be available?
They said that it's $11 billion for starters coming from tariff revenue that will go to eligible farmers of row crops, farmers who have been affected by the trade wars with China and other countries, who have both seen orders dry up, as China, for example, cut off this year orders of U.S. soybeans, but have also seen the prices of some of their inputs rise as a result of these new tariffs. And so these payments, and they say that farmers will know by the end of this month how much money they're getting, and that those payments will go out by the end of February in order to provide them with a bridge so that they can place orders for the next harvest season, at which time the president insisted today their fortunes will be a lot better than they were this year.
Nancy Cordes, North Lawn of the White House, thank you so very much. 90 years ago, a president with a big domestic agenda said he needed swift implementation of that agenda to save the nation. And he tried to fire a bureaucrat named William Humphrey, a member of the Federal Trade Commission. Humphrey and his trust sued, and the Supreme Court ruled against that president. That president was Franklin Delano Roosevelt. President Trump's top lawyer told the Supreme Court today that that decision, way back in FDR's time, was deeply flawed, and that presidents should be able to fire members of independent agencies. The High Court appeared sympathetic, meaning a vast restructuring of federal power may soon follow. For more on this, CBS News chief legal correspondent Jan Crawford joins me now from the Supreme Court. Jan, you were there. How'd it go?
Well, I mean, today's Mr. Humphrey is a FTC commissioner by the name of Rebecca Slaughter. And when President Trump fired her back in March, she sued. She said presidents, because of that old case you cited, can't fire members of these independent federal agencies. The way they're created is that they have, 5-year, 7-year terms. They go through administrations, and they're supposed to be bipartisan. Her lawyer made those arguments in court today, and it was a pretty rough row for him to hoe, because this is a Supreme Court that has signaled over the years that is increasingly concerned about the power that these independent federal agencies now exercise. Whatever it may have looked like back in 1914 when Congress created the Federal Trade Commission, or in 1935 when it last weighed specifically on this issue, that is not the modern day federal agency.
And was there a conversation before the High Court, Jan, about the implications of if the Supreme Court were to side with the administration on this case, could that jeopardize the independence of something like the Federal Reserve?
Major, I think as you indicated, this is a pretty clear 6-3 split, with the conservatives siding with the Trump administration and saying that presidents do have this power because these agencies have changed, that they're accountable to no one now. So the president can have this power to remove these officials. At least then he has to be accountable to the voters. The liberal justices didn't see it that way at all. They predicted chaos. Justice Sonia Sotomayor said to the lawyer for the Trump administration, for example, that you're asking us to basically destroy the structure of our government. But again, those are only 3 of the justices on that 9-member court. And I think the conservatives pretty clearly signaled that this is the direction they're going. And Major, they've been signaling it for years. There have been several cases going back at least in the past decade where they've gradually said that Congress can't put these limits on presidential firings. And in fact, President Biden himself fired a member of the Social Security Administration using some of that same kind of rationale. So this is a case that, while I think it is going to be a victory for Trump, it's important to remember that it's going to apply to all presidents, that Democratic presidents will also have this same authority. When they come into office, they can remove these members of these independent federal agencies if the court rules, as it did suggest that it would be today in the FTC case, which also means it'll apply in some of these other federal agencies like the National Labor Relations Board, the Consumer Product Safety Commission, and on and on. There's about 24 other agencies that will impact, Major.
Going even farther back in history, Alexander Hamilton argued on behalf of an energetic executive. Well, that was one of the issues before the court. Jan Crawford, as always, thank you so much for summarizing. There are times when high-profile trials in America become a prism for other societal issues, where the crime itself and rules of evidence are proxies for larger debates about what defines justice here. Now, this is always an imperfect exercise, but it's one America has repeated more than once. And the case of Luigi Mangione is shaping up to become, quite possibly, one of these cases. And we will periodically monitor both aspects of this case, the legal process, the ins and outs, and what this case may or may not represent outside of the courtroom. To help us with that tonight, CBS News legal contributor Caroline Polisi joins me now. Caroline, always a pleasure. It's a hard ask, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Do the first thing, the prism that this case looks like it's becoming.
Yeah, so, I liked how in that introduction you separated the legal from sort of the court of public opinion. What we're seeing these days over the course of this multi-day suppression hearing that was really triggered by the defense's motion to suppress really important evidence. We're seeing the legal technicalities come into play, which is really important. They're arguing essentially that Luigi Mangione's Fourth Amendment and Fifth Amendment rights were violated by the Altoona Police Department. And specifically where it matters most, Major, is in the recovery of evidence found in his backpack at the McDonald's. So he's arguing essentially that this was a violation of his Fourth Amendment rights because it was a warrantless search. Everybody agrees it was a warrantless search, but there are well-known exceptions to the Fourth Amendment protection against unlawful searches and seizures without a warrant. And one of those is a search incident to arrest, wherein the police have a reasonable fear that potentially the suspect could gain access to anything within his grabbable distance, that he may be a danger to others around him and the police. And that's essentially what they're arguing here. So you're hearing a tale of two different perspectives, really. The prosecution is saying they needed to find this evidence, which, by the way, is make or break evidence, Major, in this trial. I mean, we're talking about the journal that details meticulously the motivation for this crime, and then the murder weapon itself, the 3D printed gun. So here we're focused really more on those legal issues, although we are getting a preview of what the broader trial could look like in the months to come.
And Caroline, to note, the broader societal conversation about this trial is not to adjudicate the legitimacy of that debate one way or the other, but clearly people are looking at this as the system represented by the victim and someone who's unhappy with the system represented by the defendant, and this conversation and legal jousting over evidence, a representation of both sides, the system and the one who's being charged as challenging, if you want to believe it that way or view it that way, the system writ large.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And as a criminal defense attorney, I can tell you that all the time clients are frustrated by the system or by the man because they feel that their constitutional rights get trampled on. Luigi Mangione has some legitimate arguments here, and it rankles sometimes me and other defense attorneys to hear these called technicalities when we're talking about adherence to the Constitution and your Fourth Amendment right against unlawful searches and seizures, your Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination, which really are hallmarks of our criminal justice system. But having been around this system for a while, my prediction is that this evidence likely will come in, regardless of any procedural defects that the Altoona Police Department may have engaged in. There's something known as the inevitability doctrine, that this evidence would have been found anyway. Again, nobody's arguing that this evidence isn't real, isn't pertinent, isn't relevant. We're arguing about the way in which it was obtained. And that, again, has broader implications. Luigi Mangione has a huge following on social media because of sort of who he is, how he has described, or he allegedly has described, the reasoning for this crime. And so, yeah, you're seeing it play out on a micro level here with this macro sort of ideology behind it.
And we're going to continue our conversation about the evidence, the process, and the larger societal conversation. And Caroline, I hope you help us with that in the not too distant future. Thank you so very much. So to come on the Takeout, COVID-era fraud schemes in Minnesota, more than $1 billion in losses and 61 convictions. Is there more wrongdoing to discover? What does it mean for Governor Tim Walz? Also, anger over attempts by an Illinois Democratic representative's name is Chuy Garcia to pave a path to victory for his hand-picked successor. And we'll talk in a minute to a ticked-off Democrat running for that seat in the House as an independent. Plus, the Texas Senate race about to be upended. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett poised to jump in at pretty close to the last minute, prompting one announced candidate to back out. The Takeout returns in 90 seconds. Welcome back to the Takeout. The Treasury Department now investigating a COVID relief fraud scheme in Minnesota that the Biden Justice Department prosecuted for years. Dozens have been convicted, many of Somali descent. President Trump has recently harshly attacked the entire Somali community in Minnesota. Republican State Representative Kristen Robbins from Minnesota joins us now. We should note that she is also running for governor. Representative, it's good to have you with us. Before we get to the fraud, I just want to say, and in your own words, describe how comfortable or uncomfortable you are with President Trump's rhetoric about Somalians who live in Minnesota.
Well, I think it's important to call out that the majority of the fraud we've uncovered thus far is in the Somali community. But I also always point out that the best whistleblowers I have often come from the Somali community. So both things are true. And one of the reasons the fraud was allowed to persist for so long is because people were unable to say out loud without ramifications that it was largely in the Somali community. And we have to be able to say the truth if we're going to get to the root of this problem. So I'm happy to acknowledge that, but I'm also happy to acknowledge the whistleblowers. Both things are true.
Representative, this started as a fraud scheme dealing with food allocations during COVID. But I have read recent stories that there are concerns that this could also be involved in housing and autism programs in the state of Minnesota. Do you share those concerns?
Absolutely. Those are substantiated, and we've already had indictments and in both of those areas. What we're seeing, though, is a much larger area of fraud in all the Medicaid expansion areas in Minnesota. So it's housing stabilization, autism centers, non-emergency medical transportation, sober homes, integrated community supports, many other programs. So in addition to those you've named, the governor has now belatedly stopped payment in 14 other program areas, and we are continuing to do hearings. I have new whistleblowers coming out of the woodwork every day. So we are just at the tip of the iceberg on this.
And what does the state lack, or did it lack anything to get to this sooner? There are those stories I've read that said the state a long time ago notified federal prosecutors. That's how this ball got rolling. Do you dispute that state auditors were on this early enough?
So the Office of Legislative Auditor has had reports citing problems with internal controls going back many years. Where the accountability fell down was in the executive branch. So those reports were ignored. And it wasn't really the state that reported to the feds. It was the feds who came in and flagged something for the state that started the Feeding Our Future investigation. And as you point out, that was under President Biden with a Democrat U.S. attorney here, Andy Lugar. He did fantastic work. And now new U.S. attorney Andy Rosen is Daniel Rosen, forgive me, is picking that up, and we are continuing to have terrific help from our federal partners.
Do you expect more prosecutions and/or indictments?
Absolutely. I know many cases are ongoing. I've investigated many of the whistleblower cases that come to me, and then we get to the point as a legislator where I don't have access to bank records or health records. So when we find all these credible allegations, then I turn it over either to the Office of Legislative Auditor, the FBI, or the U.S. Attorney's Office. And I know many of the things I've turned over, they're still working their way through. So it's going to be a multi-year process with, I would expect, hundreds of indictments and prosecutions. So we are just getting started, sadly. But we need to finish this. We need to get the accountability.
Representative Robbins, what's the hardcore politics of this?
You know, the reason this has been allowed to fester for so long, according to whistleblowers who reach out to me, is that they were told not to speak out because they would be called racist or Islamophobic, and it would hurt their careers. And so there was a lot of people who wanted to raise the red flag who were intimidated. We expanded whistleblower protection. It was a bill I chief authored this year. And so now whistleblowers have more opportunity to come forward, and they are, which we're grateful for. Minnesotans want clean government. They expect their tax dollars to go to effective programs. And so we are in the process of turning this ship around, but it's going to take some time.
And I imagine the answer to this question is obvious, but you are running for governor. Do you place this squarely on the shoulders of Governor Walz?
Absolutely. There are clear lines of whistleblowers to his agencies, to his attorney general, and to him in his office, where they turned a blind eye time after time, and in some cases even retaliated against whistleblowers. So yes, he held no one accountable. To this day, no one's been fired by the governor. And it's shocking to all of us who watch this unfold every day, news story after news story, and no one's been held accountable. He's very lately come to the table. It's because of all the national and local media pressure, because of the work of my committee, because of the indictments coming out of the federal U.S. Attorney's Office. That pressure is finally belatedly bringing him to take some action. But it's far too little too late. He's been there for 7 years, and let it happen.
Before I let you go very quickly, one of the garish allegations is this has funded terrorism in Somalia directly. I've read stories where prosecutors say there is no direct linkage at all that has been established. Do you agree?
So I've looked at this, and I've talked to whistleblowers, and I've also talked to the U.S. Attorney's Office. And I think what we can very clearly say is that when fraudsters took the money from taxpayers and sent it to Somalia, they were indirectly funding terrorism because al-Shabaab takes a cut. That's their standard practice. So al-Shabaab was certainly taking a cut of money that was sent from Minnesota taxpayers that was stolen over there. And whether there was like someone cutting a check to al-Shabaab directly, we have not seen evidence of that yet. But I do not know. I do have whistleblowers who say that was absolutely true, and we're still looking into that.
Al-Shabaab, part of the governing coalition or structure in Somalia. Representative, thank you so much. Kristen Robbins, I appreciate it. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you. Nice.
Next, a Democratic congressman in Illinois, in an apparent, and that's what it's described as, scheme, tries to ensure that his chief of staff would have no primary challengers to succeed him. One Democrat says, not so fast, and has jumped into the race as an independent. She joins me live. You see her right there. That's next here on The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. Here's a look at what else we and now you are watching this evening. Parent company of CBS News, that's Paramount Skydance, is making a $108 billion bid for Warner Brothers Discovery. This after it lost out to Netflix in a bidding war. That development occurred last week. The Paramount bid is being made directly to shareholders, going around the Warner Brothers Discovery Board of Directors. Last week, Warner Brothers said it had reached a deal to sell its film studio and HBO Max streaming service to Netflix. But now, Paramount Skydance CEO David Ellison says his offer is all cash, $30 per share for the entire company, including its cable networks. This is a cliche in this industry, but I urge you to stay tuned. Alina Habba has resigned as the acting U.S. Attorney for New Jersey following an appeals court ruling that found that she was unlawfully appointed. Habba will now be a senior advisor to Attorney General Pam Bondi. Bondi says Habba could return to that position in New Jersey if the Supreme Court allows the Trump administration to appoint U.S. attorneys without congressional approval. An Illinois Democratic congressman denies scheming to install his chief of staff as his handpicked successor. The congressman, Jesus Chuy Garcia, originally filed to run for re-election, but then he changed course and announced his retirement. Shortly after, his chief of staff, Patty Garcia, filed her petition to run and did so right at the deadline. The House of Representatives, looking over all this, voted to rebuke Garcia, and 23 Democrats backed that effort. I'm now joined by Myra Macias. She's a lifelong Democrat who has just jumped into this race as an independent. Myra, why did you jump into this race as an independent, and how do you regard Congressman Garcia's, and there's no connection between the two of you familially, the way he handled this?
Well, thanks for having me on. I mean, first, I volunteered and have supported the congressman's campaigns. And it's why, like many people in my community, I felt very disappointed that the congressman anointed his chief of staff as his successor. We're at a time when Democrats are trying to hold the Trump administration accountable for undemocratic actions. And it's hard to do that if we're turning a blind eye here at home when folks from our own party are partaking in undemocratic actions. So, I jumped in because I want to make sure that voters have a choice. I grew up in the district in a working class Mexican immigrant community called Back of the Yards. My father was a garbage man. My mom is still a home care worker. Everyone here in this community works really hard for the things they have. And under the Trump administration, we're seeing that life is getting more expensive. Here in Chicago, ICE is abducting our community members. And on top of that, folks aren't being given a choice to who represents them in Congress. So I'm running to make sure they have a choice in November. They won't have a choice in the Democratic primary in March, but I'll make sure they have a choice in November.
I want to ask you if is about something bigger, because there was a decided and noticeable decline in Democratic voter participation in the 2024 election. Not just in the battleground states, as you well know, but in states like Illinois, New Jersey, California, New York, where the campaign wasn't joined, but Democrats just backed out, just didn't participate. Do you think that was a reflection then of dissatisfaction with the process that left them out, that anointed Kamala Harris and pulled Biden out of the process? And do you think that is a part of what you're doing here is part of that larger reckoning the Democratic Party writ large has to come to about what happened in 2024?
Look, Major, I want to share an anecdote that I think encapsulates exactly what you're asking. Before I made any decision, I talked to folks in the community. I spoke to this young woman in her 20s, Latina, from Back of the Yards. I asked her what she thought of the process in which the congressman anointed his chief. And she told me, why should I even vote? My vote doesn't matter. And to me, as someone who has dedicated her career making sure that folks are engaging civically, do have the resources, information to vote, that was heartbreaking. I do think that we're seeing an energy on this campaign of folks who've been tired with the status quo. I mean, we announced just 3 days after filing that we raised $100,000. A lot of that donation came from grassroots donors who saw our campaign online. Folks have been DMing me on Instagram, asking if they could throw house parties for me. The energy is so palpable, and as you said, Major, it's bigger than me. It's about folks wanting change quick enough. Because as I mentioned, here in Chicago, we're seeing Trump's deportation machine in full effect, and not just detaining folks without legal status, but U.S. minors, American citizens, and people are tired of not having politicians respond to that quickly enough. And so we are seeing change, and I'm excited to be part of that process. And if folks want to get involved, they can look me up at voteformyra.com.
How tough is this going to be on an independent line? And congratulations on 100,000, but I don't need to tell you, you're a pro. You've been around this. You've been a field organizer, and you need a lot more than 100,000.
Well, it's something that I grew up with in back of the yards is this saying that nothing has ever been handed to me. And this race is definitely part of that. I mean, running as an independent is surely not going to be easy. This is a Democratic district. But I take that as an opportunity to be able to talk to the thousands of voters that we need just to get on the ballot. I mean, I need almost 11,000 signatures to get on the ballot as an independent. But I'm excited because it's giving us an opportunity to engage voters, to give them a tangible thing, fill this out with your signature, making sure that I'm on the ballot in November. And more than anything, to hear what are the issues that are top of mind for them. I mean, affordability comes up time and time again. People are no longer able to provide for their families like they once did with a government job or a union job like my father had through the city of Chicago. And so I'm excited to be able to engage those folks and have them join the campaign and be part of this opportunity. But we are expecting to raise a lot of resources and have a lot of volunteers, and we're a people powered campaign. So excited to roll up my sleeves and get that work done.
5 seconds. How many signatures do you have so far?
We haven't started. Petitions
Okay.
start in February.
Okay, Myra Macias, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Democratic primary for Texas Senate shaping up ahead of today's filing deadline. Jasmine Crockett making an announcement. Might happen within our show. If it does, we'll dip in. Maybe not. We'll see. A little suspense there. In the meantime, we're going to speak with former Congressman Colin Allred. His decision this morning to drop out of the race and instead seek a return to the House of Representatives in a newly redrawn district in Texas. More on that when we come back. This is The Takeout. Welcome back to Takeout. Today was a pretty big day in Texas politics, especially for Democrats. Former Democratic Congressman Colin Allred this morning announced he's dropping out of the race for the United States Senate. Decided instead to run for a newly drawn House seat, and he joins me now from Dallas. Colin, it's always good to see you. Thanks for making time for us. Why drop out? Why not carry ahead with the Senate campaign?
Yeah, well, listen, I thought about this very deeply, and I think there's a certain responsibility that comes with the trust that so many Texans have placed in me. And as I would go around the state, folks would tell me their story. They would open up to me in a way that let me know that we had established a relationship and a trust that also meant that I had to make sure that I did what I thought was best for our state and for the party heading into November. And I did not think that a brutal primary with a runoff, which as you know, Major, in Texas, that we don't get 50% or more in the primary, you have to have a runoff. That further extend the primary. I didn't think that would serve those folks who had placed their trust in me, but that what I could do is accept that they have gerrymandered our state ridiculously, that we are losing representation on the Democratic side, in the House, but that we can have a strong voice representing Dallas, going into the Congress to talk about what has to be done, both to stand up to Donald Trump and to the affordability crisis that we're facing and the corruption we're facing, but also to talk to the Democratic Party about some of the lessons that we have to learn, reconnecting with working people and not being so associated with elitism and being disconnected from folks. That to me is something we have to do as well, and that's what I want to do representing Dallas.
Is that also a signal that from your vantage point, Colin, Jasmine Crockett is a juggernaut?
Well, I don't know. I think that when you look at it, for us to have a successful Senate race where we're going to do something we haven't done in over 30 years, it can't really happen under the conditions that we're building, where we were going to just have, three, high-profile Democrats running, doing what they have to do to try and win, and then trying to come out of a runoff and then try and recollect and get ready for November. I just didn't see that as being conducive to a winning environment. But what I also thought, and I've always thought about this in terms of public service first, and Major, I think you know that about me, that I don't just run anywhere. This is the district where I was born and raised. I believe that we need to have a strong voice during this time, because this is not a normal time. This is not a normal election. This is not taking place with a normal person in the White House. This is happening in the backdrop of a situation where every single day the Constitution is being shredded by this president. And the Congress has really abdicated its role And I've watched that as somebody on the outside for this last year with increasing alarm as the Article 1 of the Constitution deals with the Congress, but they've acted like there is no Congress at all. And to me, that is something we have to fix, both for this president, but also going forward.
When we talked earlier, Colin, and you were still in the race, you told me that your experience running before, falling short, things were different this time, and you would be the best Democratic candidate to claim a Texas seat for Democrats. Republicans keep telling me and texting me that they can't wait for Jasmine Crockett to be in this race. She's now formally in. She'll make her announcement. We may take it live if there's something to go into, but she's filed the paperwork. Republicans tell me that that's their path to holding the Senate seat in Texas. So are you, in a way, saying the Texas Senate seat isn't winnable for Democrats?
No, of course not. And listen, I recognize that I thought that I was, of course, the strongest candidate. That's why I was running. And I believed that, with the polling and the fact that we, had developed these relationships allowed us to go into this race with a chance to talk about some of the issues that I knew were most pressing for ordinary folks here in Texas. And I was really proud of the fact that we got to go all around the state to working people instead of asking them to come to me. And I was working in restaurants and going to high school football games and going to places where I know that folks would be, where we could have these conversations that would be a little bit more unfiltered, a little bit less through the political lens. But what I think we have to do is have a unified party to make sure that we can put up a strong nominee to win in November, but also have strong voices running in other places as well. We have to end this kind of idea that it's just one person running at a time and all the other races in the state don't matter. They absolutely do matter, and the Republicans know that as well. And so what I'm going to do is, if the folks of the 33rd District will place their trust in me, I'll be a strong voice for us both in this primary, but also to help whoever the nominee is coming out of it.
When are you going to endorse?
Well, I'm focused on my race right now, and obviously, as you know, Majors is the first day of it. And I want to make sure that the folks here in Dallas know why I'm running and what I want to do for them. But I'll have more to say about that down the road. What I will say is that I've served with Jasmine. I've known her since before we were in office. I think that she's been a strong fighter during her time in Congress. And I hope she takes that fight to the Senate race and speaks to what people are really concerned about, which is, to me, as I said, the corruption that's eating away at faith in our democracy, the fact that folks feel like they're working harder and harder and can't get ahead, and really give folks hope that something can change.
My audience will note carefully that you did not mention the name of James Tallarico. What does that tell them?
Nothing. I think that what we have to do here is go through this process and make sure that we have enough support behind the nominee that we can make sure we have a good chance in this election. And I served with Jasmine. I know her well, so that's the only distinction to draw there. But what I'm really focused on is that we are losing representation in the House of Representatives for Democrats here in Texas. We're going to go from 13 out of 38, which already, Major, as you know, was a gerrymandered number, down to maybe 8 or 9 or maybe hopefully 10 folks representing on the Democratic side in Congress out of 38 person delegation. That means that the voices that are left have to be stronger. And that means we have to have our best players on the field. And I believe that I'm one of those. And that's why I'm running for Congress again.
Colin Allred, I always appreciate the time, sir. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Major.
New York City Mayor-elect Zoran Mamdani has released a video that he says offers advice to New Yorkers on how to deal with immigration enforcement actions. How this might go over with the Trump White House after a very friendly meeting. There's some still pictures of it. Yeah, with President Trump about 2 weeks ago. More on that and other topics next when we come back on The Takeout. Welcome back. Picking up where we left off with Colin Allred, Texas Democratic Congressman Jasmine Crockett officially going to announce her run for Senate. If she does it in the next 5 minutes, we'll show you a little bit of that. In the meantime, Dave Leventhal, Mario Parker join me here at the family table. Dave, senior editor at Notice. Remember, that's News of the U.S. Mario, managing editor at Bloomberg. We don't have any special thing for Bloomberg. It's just Bloomberg, okay? We tease this, and I never want to leave the audience without something we tease being talked about. So let's play Control Room, the soundbite from the video released recently by New York City Mayor-elect Zoran Mamdani.
But we can all stand up to ICE if you know your rights. If you encounter ICE, these are the things that every New Yorker should know. First, ICE cannot enter into private spaces like your home, school, or a private area of your workplace without a judicial warrant signed by a judge. That looks like this.
Gentlemen, evaluate.
Well, it looks like kind of like schoolhouse rock for immigration policy, right? Know your rights.
Preemptive.
Yes, exactly. The difference between a search warrant and other forms as well, what you can and cannot do, what they're allowed to do.
And he's right about that. I've been on ICE enforcement actions. They can knock on the door, but without your permission, if you don't have a piece of paper, they cannot enter.
Yes, no, absolutely. Now, what I'm curious about is just the reaction, right? I think you all played the still shot of his warm meeting at the Oval Office, which was very surprising. We'll see whether or not this president agrees with this video.
And how aggressive ICE will be in New York. Maybe Trump wants them to go elsewhere. I don't know. Dave?
Well, he's not saying anything that is wrong. He's stating what the law states. But we also know from Donald Trump and an experience with 6 members of Congress very recently who may or may not have said something about, military members and intelligence community officials following the law and not taking illegal orders and rejecting them, that Donald Trump is not necessarily going to play nicely with them.
Exactly. We started our show talking about MAGA versus America First, and one of the first and most visible articulators of the difference that she sees, Marjorie Taylor Greene. We have another soundbite. Control room, play that, please.
For an America First president, the #1 focus should have been domestic policy, and it wasn't. And so, of course, I was critical because those were my campaign promises. Once we fix everything here, then fine, we'll talk to the rest of the world.
Should have been domestic policy as a priority, and it wasn't. Dave.
She's trying to out-MAGA the king of MAGA. Now, she's calling it America First and drawing some distinctions here, but clearly Marjorie Taylor Greene, #1, she's not going away. So anyone who thinks that even though she's saying, I'm not going to run for this or that, I have no presidential ambitions, well...
Which she tried very hard to do last night.
She did, and she did a good job at it. But, time will have a way of telling whether that's going to hold up. And I think most betting people
And just for the audience's benefit, we are not inherently cynical, but all 3 of us have experience with politicians looking us straight in the eye and telling us no, 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 and 6 months later, well, I meant yes.
Yes, it's a rite of passage, right? And to your point, she's articulating her position, right? She's carving out this lane within the MAGAverse of the America First, the no foreign wars, all those things. And it's a bet, right? I mean, if you're looking ahead to 2028, and again, if we take her...
That America First is about a set of coherent ideas. MAGA is Trump's persona.
Exactly.
Which is dangerous terrain because he's still president.
Yes, he is, but he's not teasing 2028 anymore.
No, right.
And what in fact he's doing is talking more and more about J.D. Vance, Marco Rubio, and this ticket. And so the more that they're kind of entangled in some of these foreign affairs, and Marjorie Taylor Greene, if she so chooses to get out there in 2028, she's somewhat carving some kind of lane there.
And Henry Cuellar was pardoned by President Trump last week, then announced his candidacy for re-election as a Democrat. And what did President Trump do, Dave?
Oh, he flipped out. And he flipped out in a way that revealed that at least he didn't say it in these many words, but that he thought that Cuellar was going to become a Republican and that this was part of the deal.
Part of the understanding, the wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Know what I mean?
I mean, this has opened up a Pandora's box of issues about the pardon power and whether that needs to be reined in and whether Donald Trump is just using and abusing this to the point where presidents just finally need to, Democrat or Republican, be reeled in.
Mario, 20 seconds. A lot of Democrats in leadership last week were like smiling, like, well, yeah, we approve of the pardon. And he's a member in good standing and
yeah, and he's going to be a Democrat. And it just shows, I mean, even this deal, the fact shows the length. We talk about redistricting a lot, but we also see the lengths to which Donald Trump is trying to go to get the midterms
to maneuver and manipulate in whatever way he can. Mario Parker, Dave Leventhal, thank you so very much. Happy Monday, everyone. This is The Takeout. Relentlessly curious, reliably civil, occasionally clever. The Dead Report, coming up next.